guys. I guess we're starting shortly. Nice to see you all.
Hi, Robert. Nice to see you too.
Hi, Robert. Hi, everyone.
Hello, and delighted, Robert, to see you in the flesh. Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I've heard you on podcasts and I've seen your face, and it's great that you're with us today. I'm going to be flitting between the breakout rooms, but Anne, I'm just waiting, or Africa Trade Conference, could you let us know when we can start here?
Barbara, can you help me pronounce your name correctly?
Okay, cool.
Hi, my name is Barbara van Lochem. Hi,
Lochem.
everyone.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, super. Robert, over to you. We can start.
Excellent. Thank you, Arti. And welcome all to this stage. I hope we're on with the full crowd that wants to be with us here today. I welcome you to the Intra-Africa Trade Challenge. We're talking about food and beverages today. And the idea is that we've got some people who are doing this every day, who are experiencing this every day. Our discussion is how can digital and the AFCFTA help us to basically improve food systems across Africa. So how do we make things more efficient? How do we reduce waste? How do we get more value to consumers? How do we protect and get the value out of IP? How do we address challenges at borders? We know trade is very inefficient across borders in Africa. And how do we do this up and down the chain? So we do it at the retail level, we do it at the wholesale level, processing, and even down to the farm level. So it's a lot to do in 50 minutes, but we're nothing if not ambitious. And so my name is Rob Skidmore. I want to thank, first of all, the Africa Trade Conference for putting this together and bringing together such a great group of folks. I'm a section chief at the International Trade Center in Geneva. Teams that I manage work on food and agribusiness, and they work on technology, e-commerce, and digital entrepreneurship. So I'm really here as an observer, as somebody to learn and to hear how I can apply the great things that are happening. I want to set the tone a little bit based on my work. So at ITC, we work with about 15 to 20,000 SMEs a year, many of them in Africa. And we promote about $1 billion worth of trade and investment. So we've got some view across, but probably not to the depth and not necessarily to the level that the folks that have here. What we've seen are a couple of things which help which help organize the mind. One is we are kind of getting into post-pandemic, but the pandemic has given us a great resource, which is trust in digital skyrocketed. People suddenly thought, "Ooh, I can buy online. It's not fraud. It's real." Companies suddenly said, "I can trust my supply chain to this," because they had to. So that's number one. That trust is there, and that's a great resource. It was an accelerator. It was coming. We probably moved forward 5, 10 years. The second thing is we saw with our SME and the managers is their adjustment to digital was painful. Most of the SMEs we work with really were suffering. Suddenly they're in a distributed way. They had to have better bandwidth, better devices. They had to learn how to communicate without being in the office. So we know this transition for SMEs to a digital world is in some cases difficult, challenging, but they have to kind of meet that challenge. And we've seen a lot of companies be able to do it, and you're going to hear some great examples today. A third thing is the AFCFTA is opening up opportunities for liberalization across absolutely everything. So we may have consistent standards across the whole continent. We may have consistent ways for data to be shared. We may have better roaming plans. We may have much less issues at borders. We have financial liberalization that's also coming. So we have, and we have, I think, consumers and hopefully with freedom of movement, we'll have even workers moving more. So this opens up the potential for a huge market and a huge kind of increase in efficiencies, let's say, and a better connection across. So these are opportunities. So that's kind of why we're here. We're thinking, okay, we know those things are there, and the first panel talked about some aspects of it. Now we want to hear from companies and we want to hear cases. So that's what we got with us. The last point I'll note is we talk about digital, but digital assumes somebody's connected. So half of the world isn't connected. And that is the danger of excluding a lot of micro businesses, small businesses, consumers, individuals, farmers. We know that. So that part of what we're thinking about with digital and with technology here is how do we also connect beyond those who already have the devices and the connectivity. So that's a challenge maybe we can't solve in 50 minutes, but I think it's something to keep in mind. Digital sounds great, but if half of us don't have access to it, half of us in a way are excluded from the benefits that we're talking about today. So we've got a really cool panel. I think I can say that without any reservations. So I'm going to very briefly just basically say the name and what you're doing. And then I'm going to come to each of you for a quick 1 minute. Tell us about your journey. So be thinking, what's the most important thing I can say in a minute? So we have with us Ritesh Doshi, who's the CEO of Spring Valley Coffee, and RT apparently really enjoys this product because it's something she talks about pretty much every panel and in every piece of paperwork that I've seen. So it's Kenya's oldest premium brand, and Ritesh will tell us a little bit more about it. We have Kenneth Obiajulu, who's co-founder of Agricorp, and this is a solution that's increasing productivity and reducing post-harvest losses in spices, but I'm sure in other areas. He's had also a long career before that at the World Bank and elsewhere, and he'll tell us more about that. Kenneth is there. I see you. Hello. Then we have Madhu Srinivasan, who's co-founder of Vlinder Labs. Hello, Madhu.
Hi.
This is a traceability solution that's already in place and working in India from farm to fork. And I think what we want to learn is how is that working? It's also called an authenticity or solution. So I'm interested to hear more about that and how can it apply potentially in Africa. So I'll come back to you in a minute. And then we have Barbara von Lochem, who's a regional head of logistics at the World Food Program. And we think, World Food Program, not trade. That's not at all true. They're moving a lot of food, a lot of good stuff all around. And they've done a lot of work in digitizing that process. So I think there's stuff to learn. Barbara can tell us more about that one. So let me give you each a quick minute, starting with you, Ritesh. Tell me a little bit about the journey and a little bit about Spring Valley, the company.
Great, Robert, thanks very much for the introduction. And Arti, thanks for asking me to be here. Very similar to Arti, I was actually a regular customer of Spring Valley for many years. Spring Valley is Kenya's oldest artisanal premium coffee roaster. And I bought the business 3.5 years ago. And my wife laughed at me. She said, you're like a drug dealer. You actually bought your own supply. And that's exactly what I did. But we did it because we wanted to showcase the best of what Kenya has to offer. As we know, as everyone knows, coffee is largely a commoditized product, and most of it travels the world in green or unprocessed formats. And it's really, really important that we're adding value in country of origin. So we're Kenya's oldest artisanal premium roaster. We have 4 different lines of business. One is we own and operate our own cafes. We believe people on the continent need to experience high quality coffee before purchasing it. The second part is we supply coffee to leading hotels and restaurants and cafes across the region. And then the third is a small but growing export business. So we supply roasted coffee to customers all over the world, either direct to consumer or to other businesses around the world. And our core premise is actually quite simple. We add value to every bean that we touch. So we're not commodity traders. There are people that do that incredibly well. We are not one of them. And we're just really passionate about coffee. We don't do anything else. All we do is coffee.
Cool. All right.
Yes.
So I'm going to drill you more on that, and we're going to hear a lot about how digital is working in your business. And free samples, I think anybody who's on the call will receive a free sample. I don't know if it's not written down here, but that's just an assumption I'm making here. So Kenneth, I want to bring you in here for a minute. Tell us about your journey and how you got here.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Kenneth Obiajulu. I'm CEO of Agricorp Holdings, and just like the last speaker, basically, I was working in the development space. I think on a project funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation called State Partnership for Agriculture, right? And basically, we were supporting smallholder farmers in 3 major states. Kaduna State happened to be one of them in Nigeria. And one of their focus areas happened to be ginger being one of the largest exports, out of Nigeria, and also Nigeria being one of the, prominent producers of ginger in the world. And so for us, we saw lots of challenges that the smallholder farmers were experiencing around low productivity issues, post-harvest losses being at an all-time high, access to finance being almost non-existent. And even after that, they have to go through multiple layers of intermediaries to be able to connect their produce to superior markets. So we decided to invest in that business or in that system when I left the development space. And today that's Agricorp for you. We produce, we process, and 90% of our products are exported out of Nigeria to countries like South Africa, the UAE, Morocco, and India. And then we're looking forward to adding a serious level of processing, to ensure that we're not just commodity traders like the last speaker said. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, and then obviously unicorn status within 10 years. We're looking for that. We're looking for the billionaire status from somebody, at least somebody on the panel. Madhu, let me bring you in here. Tell us about your journey. I know you had a long career in engineering, and now you're in authenticity and traceability. Talk to us about how you got here.
Hi, I'm Madhu. Thanks for having me here. So I'm the co-founder of Vlinder, right? We founded this company in 2018 with a vision of enabling businesses to harness the power of blockchain, right? That's how we started. And we were deeply motivated with the UN Sustainability Development Goals, right? Especially that the emphasis it lays on technology for integrity, transparency, and trust, right? So with that as the basis, we started developing blockchain-based platforms and solutions. And today we are very happy that we have three major solutions. The first one is what we call as TRAG, which is the supply chain authenticity and traceability solutions. I'm going to talk a lot about it today, but in summary, it basically helps businesses protect their brands, enhance their brands, and take their customer experience to the next level. We also do have platforms on identity management, which we firmly believe. There are multiple offshoot solutions we have, and something that's relevant to this forum here is what we are doing with a parametric insurance sort of a solution that we are building for one of our customers. Lastly, we don't want to be left out with a buzzword in blockchain today, which is NFTs and non-fungible tokens. So we do have an NFT platform that's coming up with our own USPs that we can tie actually back to the supply chain, right, and collectibles that we are launching pretty shortly. So this in brief is what Vlinder does, and we'll dwell more into the track part of the solution as we proceed.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks a lot for that. And Barbara, I hope you're still with us. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you ended up in this position with World Food Programme.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so now I'm a regional logistics officer for World Food Programme in Nairobi, where we provide support to 10 country operations in the region who serve over 35 million of acutely food insecure people. WFP's vision is zero hunger, and there's a saving lives component to that and an enabling lives component. And for both of these, we need to work really closely with the private sector. We can't do it alone. And before I came to Nairobi, I was involved in the saving lives part and emergency response to floods, droughts, earthquakes, and conflict. And there again, we had to partner a lot with private sector, but also with governments, of course, to deliver. And here we have some of that in the region too, but we also work on the enabling lives part, where we help foster trade through market-based assistance, where we provide cash in one form or the other to our beneficiaries who can then buy food in markets. And so I've been involved in determining ways in which we can help develop some of those markets and trade, leveraging the demand that we bring in. That's it in very short. Over to you.
Fantastic. So we'll looking forward to hearing more about that. I know you're a big buyer, a big seller, a big mover in some of these commodities, so that so it is about trade for WFP. So we've heard about the companies, a little bit about the journeys, but now we want to drill down to how you're using digital, how you're using tech in your companies, in particular to enable trade. So Ritesh, I want to bring you back in here. How are you using digital in your supply chain? You said you're working at different levels. Talk to us about how it's there and how it's solving some of the problems that we talked about.
Absolutely, Robert. So first, Kenya's got fantastic traceability going all the way back in the history of our coffee value chain. So that traceability has been there almost since the existence of the industry. And what we're doing is we're kind of applying a digital layer above that. So for example, we're currently testing one of our coffees to have full traceability from the farm to the washing station down to the mill, but through a QR code, you'll understand kind of where that coffee was at what point in the process, which hands it touched. And right down to the end consumer. And once you scan that QR code, you'll have an option to actually add a tip to the farmer or add a tip to the roaster. But what's really interesting about this is we've had to work with a partner called Gravity Earth, a technology partner, who've been fantastic. And we have helped put in kind of very basic smartphones at various levels in the value chain. So you think about the farm, you think about the cooperative where the coffee is collected, the washing station if it's at the cooperative, the dry mill, when it goes from the dry mill to their marketing agent and their storage facility, and then eventually when it comes out to someone like us. So we actually have full traceability on that. So that's something that we're doing kind of in the domestic space. On the export space, to be honest, because that's with one coffee, we're running a trial. It's quite expensive. And the biggest challenge here has been for some of the smaller players in the space, we're willing to invest in the technology of some of our larger farm partners. But for the smaller ones, it doesn't make sense for them. So the bottleneck is really that. We're going to run the pilot with this one particular farm, see how that works. And if that does work, we'll roll that out to our 6 other kind of farmer and cooperative partners over the course of the next couple of years.
So what do you think? So I hear you, cost is one issue. It sounds like also the availability of devices and connectivity at different points in the chain. What are some of the other challenge? Because it sounds great, and it sounds like we should have always been doing this. Why haven't we? And what are the challenges that collectively we need to overcome?
Well, the truth is in Kenya, and I can only speak for Kenya, we've had it. It's just been in a non-digital form. All this information is actually collected. So when I have a big sack of 60 kilos of coffee, from the numbers, the out-trim number, I know which week that coffee was processed, where it came from, what mill it went through. So Kenya is fantastic. Applying a digital layer to that in Kenya is actually easy because we already have the information. It's already held on record in a non-digital format. The other big challenge, bizarrely, is we talk about smartphones, but there's actually electricity. Kenya is now 80% electrified, but electricity in some of these places, if you can't charge your smartphone, then how are you actually going to be able to scan what you need to scan or document that? The other challenge that we actually face is actually trust. Even with the digital infrastructure is actually the trust. Where's this data going? Who's going to use it? And there's a lot of resistance to that.
So then, okay, so I mean, Kenya is a start, and RT wants to see you continental. She wants to see this coffee on everybody's desk. How do you think digital can help there, and what kind of are your plans, both for procuring, maybe beyond Kenya, but also for selling and even going into retail?
So I think if I go back one step, I talk about Kenya's traceability. In Uganda, there's an incredible software that some of the large multinational players are using called MaxTrace, which allows you to trace coffees. They built that because their infrastructure hasn't existed. So there is technology out there. At present, we're proudly a Kenyan coffee company, and we're called Spring Valley Coffee. I live in Spring Valley. The roastery is still here. So we're really focused on showcasing today the best of what Kenya has to offer. Having said that, we have sampled incredible coffees from Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, even the Congo, and we have partner roasteries in both Uganda and the Congo. So from a processing perspective, that's underway. That's a multi-year project. In terms of export, we actually do export to a few countries across the continent and more widely beyond. In the continent, the hardest thing is actually the costs of shipping coffee. I'll give you an example of an amazing customer. I think you're going to joke about DHL. We have a customer who spends more money on shipping the coffee than the value of the coffee, but she wants it every 2 weeks in Lagos, and it's just prohibitive. We've recently registered on a website called Africa. I don't know if people have come across it, which you can buy products from all over the continent and ship them. But again, the shipping costs, the duties, and frankly, the government bureaucracy is the biggest barrier for people like us that are in the finished goods product. The documentation and duty costs are often more than the value of the product.
And what about retail? So you've got some cafes in Kenya. Is that in your plans at some point? And what kind of keeps you up at night about that one?
Absolutely. So the intention is very much to kind of be a Pan-African business where people can experience great and incredible African coffees firsthand. Back to why I bought this business. The reason that I loved the coffee at Spring Valley before I bought it was everybody else was exporting the best stuff. and the previous owners were keeping the best stuff in the country. And I'm selfish. I want a great cup of coffee every morning. And I think many of us are very, very similar. So instead of sending it out, why don't we keep that value at home? So we're starting in Kenya. We're 5 cafes in, three years in, but very much with an intention for that number to be around the 15 mark in a couple of years.
Great. Okay, we're going to come back to you, Ritesh. Thanks a lot for that. Interesting already. Digitizing processes that already work. That's one element. Trust still remains an issue. Cost, and certainly cost for shipping. So these are some things that we may hear as a pattern, and we may think that those are some of the challenges we have to solve. Kenneth, can I bring you in here? I think, as I understand it, you're doing a lot of work in ginger root in Nigeria, and as you're saying, Nigeria is one of the biggest exporters. How are you using digital in your supply chain today?
No, I mean, so typically for us, we started first as being a traditional agricultural business, right? And from an agricultural point, technology in itself is it means different things to different countries at different stages of development, right? When we think about fintechs and agricultural technology, those are two different areas, where with fintech, financial technology systems, you can easily bring out your phones, write codes, and do amazing stuff with all of that. When it comes to agriculture, especially from the production side of things, technology means different, right? Technology means how do you increase efficiency? Technology means how do you improve the productivity of farm operations? Sorry about that. How do you improve efficiency of farm production? How do you improve the yields on the farms? So it's different here. So what we have done from our end is first to develop technology that allows us to be able to, track the farmers that we're working with, bring them into our systems. And secondly, our technology allows us to be able to train the farmers on good agronomic practices that allows them to be able to increase their yields. We also provide farmers with information like weather forecasts that allows them to know when the rains are going to fall. Who would have known that issues around providing them with accurate weather forecast can increase their yields by about 10 to 15%.
Has that been has connectivity been a challenge, or the price of devices, even electricity? Have these been issues for you to get that information to them?
Of course. I mean, the farmers, typical farmers in Nigeria, smallholder farmers, cultivate on less than 1 hectare of land, don't even have the finance to, to have those kinds of information or that kinds of phones, that would enable such connectivity. So basically what we do is we run a call center system that allows, the farmers to call in, or we're able to send SMS to the farmers on rainfall patterns, and that allows them to be able to plan adequately. On the use of mechanization tools like tractors to be able to save man hours from 30 hours on land prep, to, bringing it down to about 2 hours on land preparation. So those are the kinds of systems that we're beginning to put in place. And on the market side of things, connecting them to the trade, we had to move a step back to invest in a technology company that will help with traceability and all of the good stuff that the previous speaker just talked about.
Let me ask about finished products. So you mentioned you're kind of moving, or you have been moving in that direction. Tell us about that. Are you doing flake? Are you doing powder? Are you doing candied? What kinds of processed products are you able to do?
Okay, so typically when we just started first with the production of ginger, and then we primary process it. By primary processing, we're talking about washing, slicing it, and then drying it. So that's the flake part of the component, and then we package and we export. Just recently, we raised about 17.5 million USD in our Series A round. That would see us investing heavily in the secondary processing side of things. That would bring us to start grinding them to powder, also extracting the oil out of it, and also look at various other use cases that applies to the various industries that require, ginger and some other commodities that we would want to take a look into. So ginger has pharmaceutical, food-based, and then other applications. And so we want to see how we could process our products to meet up with what the raw material requirements are for the various industries.
And just quickly, how is digital? I mean, how are you thinking digital is going to help you? What element will digital have in that side? Will you go e-commerce, direct to consumer, or how do you see it?
Yeah, so typically we're looking at getting closer to the consumers as much as possible. There's a saying here in Nigeria that the closer you are to the consumers, the more money you make. The farther away you are from
everywhere,
the less money you make. So definitely we want to, as much as possible, get closer to the consumer and create online presence and distribution e-commerce style. But also in addition to that, we also want to, for pharmaceutical-based applications, there are also cases around traceability that we would like to bring that experience from the coffee growers, from the cocoa growers, and how can we also bring that to the table? Because those are one of the biggest issues in international trade. Who are you buying these products from? Who are the people cultivating these commodities? We want to be able to engage in fair trade.
Absolutely. And is it safe? Is it a safe product? Is it a high quality product?
Exactly.
Absolutely. And is it uniform?
Yeah.
I think we're working perfectly together, because that's my perfect segue to talk to Madhu. At this stage, we had there are a couple of Davids that I'm not sure they're on the call with us yet. So if they do come on, we'll come back to them for Bringo Fresh and Agrimix. But Madhu, let me bring you in. I think Kenneth gave me a great setup. Basically, his operation, he's thinking about even going into pharmaceutical applications, health applications, traceability, uniform quality. I think even chemical composition. These are all things that he's going to have to demonstrate if he's going to be able to enter that market. So tell me about how Vlinder does it. How are you driving traceability? Is it all the way to the consumer? How does that support brands? Tell me how you're doing that.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So let's see who is driving the adoption of traceability, right? So there are many players there, right? Let me just focus on brands. Let me focus on governments, because they do play a very important role. And finally, let's talk about consumers, right? So let's talk about brands, right? And we had the two earlier speakers emphasize, right, how crazy they are and how passionate they are about driving traceability. So I would just want to give an example from Flinder's point of view, right? So our traceability platform today is driving a grain to grass sort of a solution for a leading distillery in India, right? So when we actually started looking at what are the problems the distillery space has, we did really find that counterfeiting is a big problem. And there are many unique characteristics of the product which the end consumer really does not know, right? So when we actually designed a platform, right, which has authenticity built in along with traceability and showed it to the customer, right, he was actually wowed with the prospects of what this solution could offer him, right? So then we went ahead.
Tell us what you mean by authenticity in this context. I'm not sure that seems means the same thing to everybody.
Yeah, so I think one of the key problems from a distillery standpoint is counterfeiting, right?
Yeah.
Brands do lose a lot of value because once the products are counterfeited, right, the customer experience actually goes for a toss, right? So we did build, novel and innovative solutions involving NFC chips, and blockchain technology, which basically let that specific customer know that when any end customer buys his product, even before he actually opens it, he would actually know whether it's authentic or not, whether the bottle of whiskey has been opened or not, right? To that level. So the engagement was even before he buys, right? You could actually know whether it's a counterfeit or not. So it basically enhances his overall brand value, right? Added to this is digital gives you a single place of aggregation of all information, right? So he could actually push, the story of, his entire product, right from, where his cereals were sourced, how they were fermented, right? And what was the distillation process, right? And, how was it aged, right? What are the sort of casks it was used, right? And how was it bottled? The entire provenance solution, right? From the time the cereals were procured till the time you purchase it, right? The entire information is available at the click of a phone, right? Using our app as well as the website, right? So basically, what it actually added, right, was enhanced customer experience, right? So today it actually enabled the brands to establish a direct to customer channel, right? The thing that we did different was personalization. We believe that customers are the kings, right? So our solution tries to personalize, the experience in terms of the overall communicating the overall product journey, right?
So let me ask you a quick one, just about, because we hear a lot about blockchain, but we also hear about the danger of garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So that
I think
it right at the beginning, they've got to put something in there that's quality for that to mean something.
It's a very good question, right? And I was actually going to come to that, because one of our previous speakers actually mentioned that as a specific problem, right? Now, what do we do is, that's why I did mention as a part of my introduction, we do have a solution on identity management, right? So our traceability platform uses a lot of constructs from the identity management platform that we use, right? And the very reason why we do that is to sort of prevent, right, garbage in from getting into the blockchain, right? So so there's a lot of deterrent once you know who is actually writing into the blockchain, right? So we do have a certain patented technologies that we have derived and we have built into Track, which to a large extent prevents garbage getting into the system, right? So that is one part of the solution, right? So brands do play a big role in promoting traceability and solutions. And when I speak about this, right, it's just not small distillers. We have been talking to distillers of different sizes, right from very small distillers to the larger ones too. And everyone understands today that the way they can actually scale is through employing traceability solutions in their products. The fact that we launched our lighthouse customer in the middle of the COVID pandemic basically gives the commitment, right, of the brands to basically see how important this feature is to have in their products, right? Now let me talk briefly about governments, because that's again something that's very interesting. Now every government in the world has a common problem to solve, which is the problem of the solvers, a problem of the farmers, right? Because if you basically take care of your farmers, who are the breadwinners of your nation, most of your other things are actually taken care of, and
you get a lot of votes. And you get a lot of votes as well.
I didn't want to sound political here, right? But if you look at the challenges that a typical farmer actually faces, not one single entity actually can solve all the problems, right? Yeah. Even 10% of the problems, and most governments have realized this, and they encourage forming consortiums, right, where different people actually pull in with their expertise, and these consortiums actually go ahead and implement proof of concept that basically prove that the effective yields of farmers can improve, the effective income of farmers can improve, blah blah blah, the various metrics. What we have seen actually is governments are at the forefront of initiating and pivoting such consortiums and driving POCs, right? As we speak, I'm very happy to tell that we are actually engaged in one such consortium in India, right, where we are actually, trying to implement traceability solutions right from farm to fork for one type of a crop which is grown in a particular state that we are actually working with.
And the government interest there is that they can see the value generated and how much of that gets to the farmer, and in a way they can balance that. Is that the idea?
That's exactly the motive, right? So that's, governments do actually play a very important role. The last I want to talk is customers, although I touched a part of it, right? When you talk about customers, we need to be a little bit careful, because we are actually living through a series of generations, right? The millennials are, no problems at all, because they are at the forefront of, asking for more. They don't trust anything that they are being told. They want proof, right? So when it comes to millennials, there is a lot of engagement, right? But the not so tech savvy, I would also want to give a point there, right? Because we cannot take them for granted. We just had an issue in India like a few months back where, the quality of honey that was being sold, there was this thing that, there were artificial agents being mixed, right? Then actually you could see the reaction of all the major brands there. Everybody came in with some form of traceability, right? Either in terms of QR, or in terms of making sure your certifications are actually available to be displayed, because brands then realize that, the customers, if they are not being told the truth of how their products are being made, there's a big chance of churn, right? And it is just not the millennials that we are talking of, right? So the customers have a lot of inertia, as I see, right? And we cannot just neglect the fact that they're not asking for information does not mean that they are not interested in the information being used.
And that trust that's out there can be quickly lost in situations like that.
Right.
Great.
So
yeah, another 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I would just want to say that it's all the three that are important, and we need to weigh in. And depends on the type of product. Everybody has their role to play. And specifically, right, the problem that you brought about of garbage in, garbage out is very, very important. These systems need to work at the end of the day, right? Or it actually has no purpose. So there is a lot of thinking in terms of technology and solutioning and architecting that goes around in terms of making sure how we can add more value into the problem statement that we are solving.
Absolutely. And how do we make it accessible to people who may have a feature phone, they may have no phone, and they don't, and we've seen over and over again, Cadillac systems that we design. I love them. I really personally love them. I've got a laptop, I can see it on my screen, and people in the field immediately ignore this because it's just inaccessible. And so there's systems based on WhatsApp and all sorts of things that I know that are being adapted for that kind of use. So we'll come back to you, Madhu. Thanks a lot for that. I want to bring Barbara in here. Barbara Van Lochem, you're with the World Food Program. So it's also a big brand. So let's put it that way. You've also got a brand in the United Nations, in the system, and are doing many good things. Talk to us about how you digitize the supply chain. You're actually reaching also, I've been mentioning people who aren't connected, people a little bit outside the system. You also have to deal with them. Tell us about how you've been digitizing the supply chain and how you think it impacts trade. And I guess it mentions, I read that you're working in Somalia. So this seems like a very potentially difficult market. So maybe start with that.
Yeah, so we do reach, we do go to hard to reach places where there's no connectivity, and there we sort of we have more infrastructural interventions that also benefit trade, right? But more and more the context that we operate in, also a lot of our beneficiaries have mobile phones, more and more also smartphones in certain contexts, right? Connectivity is there, it's coming in as well. So we are also using digital infrastructure to reach people. And if you're talking about Somalia as an example, when COVID hit, we really had to change the way we work as well, as many did. And normally we bring food to certain locations, and then a lot of people come there, assemble there to collect their food. Or we transfer funds to people, and then they go in groups to markets to buy food in the markets, right? So this grouping, this congregation of people was posing new risks in this pandemic environment. So we had to decentralize essentially our distribution, and instead of people coming to buy or collect the food, we had to go out to the people and to their homes and bring the food. Whether it was a WFP food or food bought through markets. And so we use technology to do that. Beneficiaries could buy, using their mobile phone, the food that they wanted and indicate when they wanted it delivered. And then WFP had to adjust basically their entire supply chain to almost operate like a DHL to repackage quantities and deliver it to homes. So, on the one hand, this really developed a whole new transport sector that we normally don't work with, because these are small vehicles and motorbikes, etc., that really grew. On the other hand, also farmers and traders were able to get into that platform and offer discounts. So it widened the market and the transparency, and beneficiaries had more choice and more value for money. So that was really a success story, and it sort of changed our supply chain from push to pull, right? So that's
it's almost like a direct to consumer. It's almost like a direct to consumer. So it's almost like an e-commerce. I say WFP, here's my selection, and it's delivered to me like that.
Yeah, and it also works with the normal phone and not the smartphone, so that it has less features, but it can also work in those more remote contexts. So that is now a new business model essentially that we created that's now being picked up in other countries and is getting corporate attention. So that's a clear example. We also buy a lot of food in the region, as you mentioned also in the beginning. I think we move in the order of 2 million tons of food through this region every year, and we buy about 500,000 tons of food every year in neighboring countries. And so we have to operate quite a bit through aggregators, but we try to buy a certain percentage from smallholder farmers. So that's also where the traceability piece comes in, also for us, that we use technology to understand what we're buying from whom, and also whether the income of smallholder farmers grows, right, through the demand that we provide. So that's another example there.
Can I explore that last bit? So how does that information come to you, so you can say we bought a quality or an adequate product, and that we've paid somebody, and we can see a little bit of their income? How do you get that information? How does it come? How does it get to you?
Yeah, that's again app-based and with various partners, and I think we haven't cracked everything yet. So it's still under development to improve, notably also because it gets aggregated at some point, and then how the traceability piece to the final end, which we've cracked now in Somalia, but that end-to-end process still needs to be secured. So it's a work in progress. Yeah.
And I'm kind of working towards the question, which is this applicable? Could companies pick this up in the technology you're using in some ways to have their own direct-to-consumer solution, and also to have, because even as Ritesh mentioned and Kenneth, consumers want to know that income is getting back to smallholders. So could these apps potentially have a commercial application?
Is that to me or to?
Yeah, to you. Yeah, to you.
I think so. And I think, I heard already some very interesting also interventions by the other colleagues on the people on the call. So, but definitely, yes.
Okay, and also we're now hearing some more samples. We know we're going to get coffee. I think we're going to get whiskey, if I understood correctly from Madhu. Ginger products for health. And then staple foods through Barbara's operation. I want to come back to Kenneth, because one thing that we heard a little bit about, even from Ritesh, was even availability of electricity. So Nigeria, this is mixed, and a lot of places let's say in Australia, I've got a case here where you can sell power back to the grid and be paid back in beer. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. Do you think there's similar ways where there could be, power solutions, decentralized power solutions, and other things that could go out into the field with the smallholders you work with, that could potentially solve some of these gaps? Could that can digital and can tech help us there? Kenneth? Can you hear me, Kenneth? Are you on mute?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, I personally believe that the way forward for power generation and enabling electricity across the agricultural value chain is possible. It has to be highly decentralized. The system that we're operating in a country like Nigeria makes power too centralized, and that's where the challenges themselves are. But beyond that, I also believe that Africa should be seen as a single market in most cases. And I'll give you a typical case in point. We want to be able to produce ginger and a couple of other spices in Nigeria, and we should be able to ship that out to, for example, in Zambia, and carry out the processing activities in Zambia, where the structures allows for all of that and distributes back to other African countries, and so that's the way we see it, but then again, it comes back to can we digitize the system in such a way that we're able to enjoy the operational benefits of operating in various countries and bringing that benefit to all of Africans as well.
Because we've also seen solutions in, let's say, Uganda. I know of one where digital is also a way they can pay the bill, that they can monitor usage, that they can also monitor the equipment and so on. Do you see these things already coming, to the places where you're working?
Yes, of course. We've seen various kinds of innovations around digitization of processes. We've seen, just like we have pay as you go for your telephone bills, we're beginning to see pay as you go for power as well. We're beginning to see financial inclusion for smallholder farmers, that allows them to have a financial footprint that would enable them to draw down on finance from formal financial institutions. We're seeing a lot of all these processes being digitized and, adding value to the lives of smallholder farmers in those catchment areas.
I think and these have tremendous potential, especially for me, fintech could reduce the cost of financing incredibly, and that could, grease the wheels all up and down the chain. People are paying 2% a month or more. None of us could make money at that rate. They must, it's the potential for that is really enormous, and to reduce obviously all of the things around carrying cash and making cash payments. Thanks very much, Kenneth. So I'm going to come back to you guys to ask about your advice to government. So start thinking, if you could get from government, from AFCFTA Secretariat, from Rex and so on. I'm going to ask you guys to give me your thoughts on what they should focus on. But I want to come back to Madhu quickly for a minute or two. I think your solution hasn't yet been applied in Africa. When you're listening to the kind of challenges you hear, what should folks be thinking about in terms of applying traceability solutions in Africa, in retail and food and beverage and processing? What are some of the things that come to mind after you've been hearing these?
I think it's great that people are thinking about traceability. I think the beginning is already made, right, from that standpoint. Coffee, cocoa, honey. I think these are some products where we could start applying the provenance steps. Authenticity, there are multiple ways we could actually look at counterfeiting and authenticity, right? And I think one of the key things that I would want to bring to the table is something what we passionately call as phygital, right? So today, we should leverage technology to sort of have each physical product leave a digital trail, right? And as long as you're able to do that in a seamless and a cost-effective way, your products will speak for yourself, right? And we see that as a broader trend, right? Be it in coffee, be it in cocoa, be it in honey, or anything else, right? So I think we should move towards piloting, right? These sort of solutions for each type of crop and see how the market participants and the end customers do react. I think that's something we should start taking that step across the entire agri food chain, right? I think the second thing I would want to slightly talk about here is parametric insurance, right? We have done quite an amount of work with one of our partners, right? But we do see parametric insurance as a game changer for farmers in terms of accessibility to finance and providing the right cost insurance, because a lot of the farm outputs today in majority of the world is still dependent on weather, which is highly.
When you say parametric insurance, you mean like indexed insurance, so that this would be insurance that folks that has a payout based on observable things like storms or drought.
Perfect.
Things
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct, right? And so it breaks away from the traditional parlance of insurance, where you get insurance based on the size of the land, blah blah blah. Right? It's based on one unique piece, and you can, if you have a higher coverage or want a higher coverage, you could actually apply for higher units, right? And the payout is automatic, and it's all based on occurrences from authorized weather sources, right? And that's, I think, a big leap in terms of technology and in terms of providing the financial security to farmers, right?
And low cost.
At low
Low
cost,
cost.
right? Yeah. I think that's something that is definitely, many markets are moving towards that, and that's one area where they could be focused on.
Great, thanks a lot. And I think it's also really interesting because you can subsidize it for certain categories of folks, and you have that coverage where you don't have to go down and figure out each individual who's going to get it. But you say, some of these, a drought may affect everybody. It's not a good insurance product in that sense from a commercial standpoint, but it can have incredible development benefits. So thank you for that, Madhu. So I want to bring in Ritesh, Kenneth, and Barbara again here to talk about challenges with digitization, with digital, and what kind of advice you give to governments, to people like me who are in the development business, who are trying to help and trying to improve ecosystems. What's your advice? What would be your one or two suggestions? Ritesh, let me start with you.
One is just intra-Africa trade. I mean, we actually find it's harder to trade within the continent or across the continent than it is for the US or the UK. For example, we got our US FDA approvals done remotely, virtually, to be able for us to export to the US during COVID. And to get somebody from local government to come in and actually kind of do the certifications without being corrupt, without asking for something. And then those marks, like the Kenya Bureau of Standards, the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, for those things to then be transferable across other parts of the continent, so we don't need to get recertified. I think recognizing other certifications, but also just streamlining the process. The number of licenses and kind of documentation required for us to do business both domestically, but also across the continent is absurd. And that's what drives costs up.
That's and that's the kind of thing AFCFTA, I mean, it's still being negotiated and there's so many details, but do you think that has the potential to do that, to kind of begin to look at problems like that across the continent?
I think it does if there are real teeth in terms of the conversations that are being had. It's one thing to give advice to a government, but these governments, I'll be very candid, most African governments, we probably have kind of people from government here, are not conducive to business. They're actually inhibited. They're actually a problem. If they just stayed out of our way, people could get on with it. And that is the reality of the situation. It might not be PC to say so, but I think it is the truth. And they're more, we in our industry and our sector does well in spite of the government, not because of its support.
Yeah, so I think that, and the idea is, if we could do this across the continent, if we could find, I mean, there are legitimate government interests in different areas, but how do we find the least distorting? I mean, that's kind of the language we use, least distorting way to kind of accomplish that government interest. So that's interesting points. Let me bring in Kenneth. Is he still with us? Kenneth, what would be your advice to the governments and the AFCFTA Secretary? What should they be focusing on? Is Kenneth still with us? I think he may have dropped off. Let me bring in Barbara, and then we'll see if Kenneth comes back on. Barbara, what do you think government should be focusing on in the digitalization space?
Yeah, I think what Ritesh just said really resonates also with me. I think, having an end-to-end vision on making supply chains more competitive and more resilient to foster that regional trade is important. And digitization can bring a lot more transparency and even efficiency gains, but it can also create a lot of more bureaucracy and delays and make it more cumbersome to do business. I think a recent example that we are experiencing is this new customs clearance system introduced by Kenya. That is, it has so many steps and steps within steps, and it's just making it difficult to do business in Kenya, to be honest. And so there needs to be that balance between protection and production, and you need to look at the entire supply chain and what can create advantages for a government in some parts. Then that it still leaves a lot of it creates more bottlenecks, and there are non-tariff barriers that need to be addressed all along the supply chain to make it more competitive. And this is what we hope to be able to advocate more on and work more with regional entities on. And we have a big operational footprint in this region, and we can help test solutions, and we can report back to regional entities and governments. And so, but I think it's really important to address all those barriers to trade. Thank you.
I agree. And one of the things we also talk about is, consult the private sector when a system's coming,
Exactly.
when a regulation's coming, make it predictable, make it
exactly, and consult with us, and use us also to help develop and improve systems.
That's it. So that predictability, I think, is the one thing. If we hear from business, is the one thing. If they couldn't have anything else, it's one thing in regulation that people really want: visibility, transparency, predictability in terms of the rule-making processes, and even systems such as the one that you mentioned. I think maybe digital has failed us in the case of Kenneth. So he's dropped off to illustrate the difficulties that we can face in such situations. I think we're coming slowly to the end here. I wonder if there's a question, Africa Trade Conference folks, is there a question, Artie, that we can take from the audience?
Let me just check with the organizers, but I think from my perspective, yes, I'd just like to add, and I've been in the healthcare breakout as well. Governments do seem to be part of the problem, and I think what I'd like to see is some sort of, and I believe it sort of happens in some parts of the continent. If you are, for example, licensed with the Ghana FDA, this is more on the healthcare side, but since it's the Food and Drugs Agency, if you're registered with them, then that's recognized in Sierra Leone, from what I understand. But really, we want this to be happening across the continent. I mean, the ideal world would be one single agency where you supply your electronic documents, you pay electronically, and then maybe each government needs to have a bit of a share of that revenue, because I'm sure that's one of the drivers for which this bureaucracy exists, because it brings in money. But yeah, I mean, there's if I'm producing ginger in Nigeria, the world's 4th largest, apparently, producer of the crop, then I should be able to sell it anywhere I want on the continent. As long as I'm doing business correctly, as long as somebody somewhere has approved me, and as long as I can prove what I have is genuine, why not? So I think, yes,
digital can potentially do that for us. It's not the stacks of paper with the coffee, with the coffee cup stains that go from port to port. It's absolutely digital that can do it. I had first of all, I know Artie mentioned we should definitely plug the exhibition space, which people should go to immediately after this, and they should buy tons of stuff from exhibitors. And I think Vlinder, Madhu's company, is one of the exhibitors there. So I recommend everybody to go to that. We also had one question, which is to you, Ritesh, asking if you're willing to partner with other companies potentially to sell in export markets. So would you be open to people reaching out to you for partnerships?
Absolutely, and we already do, and we most definitely are very open to it, especially when people have kind of boots on the ground and have local logistics experience, knowledge. We already work with people kind of around the world, everywhere from Bahrain, Netherlands, and Germany, now to Botswana and Poland as well. So we'd be keen to find more partners on the continent.
Great. I think that we may be coming to the end of our time. I predicted it would be a cool panel. It's been a cool panel. I think we've had really interesting, good variety of stuff that we've talked about. We mentioned, how digital can help with traceability, with trust, with improving processes, with actually getting down to those who are even unconnected through traceability solutions, through monitoring how we get payments to them. We also talked about challenges. So, and I think there was some good advice to governments, which really are around, you may have objectives, but try to do those in the least distorting way and try to reduce redundancy in the system. And digital can do this. If you got trust with a regulator in one place, let that be mutually recognizable in other places across the regional economic communities and maybe across the continent. And obviously try to make the paperwork consistent and comparable. it's all very close to each other. We see this many times, but if it's not asked the same way, it's going to have to be asked again. And I wanted to thank Ritesh for saying something positive about the U.S. We don't hear that. We don't hear that all the time. So that's something I'm checking as a positive for today. So maybe I want to hand it back to RT or the African Trade Conference. Thank you again for the opportunity to be the moderator here.